What's up, people? I'm Shaggy, the opinionated hippie, and this is part 14 of my deep dive into the Moody Blues studio catalog. We're on 1991's Keys of the Kingdom. Um, I did not have a lot of, the bar was really low, my expectations for this album. The last two, we had sort of lost the thread on what made the Moody Blues. The Moody Blues, I think, were in the 80s, maybe trying to be a little maybe pop friendly. The production was starting to get 80s fied, 80s fied, which is not a good thing. Just the bad drums, just that glossy sheen on everything. So I have to admit, I wasn't expecting much going into this. And I was very, very pleasantly surprised at how much I enjoyed it. Um, Two, maybe three things to say before I get into the songs. Um, there's nothing cutting edge on this. They're not redefining any genres. I would say they're not doing anything that, if this album had not been made, would in any way alter the shape change of musical history. Um, I didn't recognize any of the songs, so I don't believe there were any hits. I think one could listen to this album and ask yourself, have any of these people listened to the radio since the late 70s or early 80s within the past 10 years? Does whoever produced this, and apparently there was three different producers, were they aware that we were no longer deep in the 80s? Did they know about any of the musical developments that had happened since the 70s, other than maybe some light disco? Um, it's not a very, like, if I'd listened to this in 1991, there is no way in the world this would have engaged me. I would have checked out immediately. It would have been a one and done. Um, but at the same time, some of this stuff, while it was sort of like, all right, this is 1991, a year music is going to just dramatically change, thanks to some bands out of Seattle. Um, this was something that was out of date by a decade, but at the same time was decades ahead of its time, because in 20 years, this retro late 70s light dance disco thing would come back strong in like the 2010s. You have a lot of bands that would dip their toes in this and kind of have that sort of retro vibe. So they're in this weird place where they're behind the times, but way ahead of the times, by having never changed, or at least adopted a musical subgenre, like disco-fying classical strings, all that stuff that would be revisited again in like 20 years. Um, but yeah, it's there's just not much to it. But I did really enjoy it. Especially the first six songs. There's 11 songs on here. I think the first half of the album is much stronger than the second half. Um, and Yeah, I found myself just kind of having a good time. Opens up with a song called Say It With Love, which kind of reminds me of like a Jeff Lynne, tight, clean, well produced, straightforward, relatively simple pop song. Kind of the stuff he was doing with Tom Petty, stuff he was doing with George Harrison. Like, really nice production. Love the message, positive message, Say It With Love. Think it's a good opener. Um, Not going to rock anybody's socks off in 91 of all years, especially, but for whatever it is, if the Moody still had people listening to them, and I don't know, I enjoyed it. I thought it was a good, strong song. The second song, Bless the Wings That Bring You Back. If I have a complaint, I wish there was a different second song, because this does ruin that early momentum. Ballady, very 80s synth driven sound. Didn't really do anything for me, the second one. But then the third song, Is This Heaven, has this really neat sort of skipping little light guitar riff that kind of dominates it, an acoustic kind of guitar riff. And then some really, really nice melodies in this song that remind me of something else, but I don't know what it is. Either it's just an instantly sort of melody that hooks you, or it's like, okay, it's triggering something else in my mind that it might be a better song altogether. But this one almost has a Zoe Deschanel pep about it. Just this kind of light skipping, lighthearted, cool little vibe. Is This Heaven? You can see Zoe Deschanel doing like an Is This Heaven like pop. Um, yeah, it kind of builds slowly but stays gentle over the course of it. It's a really neat song. It kind of stands out. Um, Maybe could have been a radio hit, or maybe a deep cut that some DJ played if we lived in an era where people were allowed to play deep cuts. But that era was gone. I kind of liked it. I thought it was a pretty good song. Say What You Mean, absolutely loved. Parts one and two. ELO, disco light, late 70s, cheesy string effects. Um, this is one of the songs that would have killed in like the 2010 retro explosion. This would have been huge. It feels like, um, yeah. And then it gets weird towards the end. We get some spoken word aspect. We get some sound effects like an explosion or something. 5.5 minutes of just them doing something in 1991 that no one else was doing in 1991. Like they're going to that late 70s disco plasticity vibe, and everybody else is like, playing grungy rock in their garages. Um, but yeah, I thought it was a fun listen and cheesy, 100%. But did it work for me? It did. Um, Lean on Me Tonight, big orchestral start, very not 1991, very ballady. We drop into like this mid-tempo pace. Guitar on this and the following song, I think it's the following song, yeah. Both have this really nice, just kind of simple, clean guitar solos, but really nice kind of electric tone, just occupying the middle of the song. Melodic and sweet. Not a bad song, not a great song, but it didn't offend me in any way. And then the last really good song on this album, which opens up side two, Hope and Pray. Um, just kind of your driving Moody's pop, kind of the stuff they were doing in the 80s that they had. I Know You're Out There Somewhere. What was the other one? Know You're Out There Somewhere. In Your Wildest Dreams. That kind of drive, like flirting with what Wall of Drugs. uh, what is that band? War on Drugs, kind of flirting with that sort of propulsive kind of drive with a nice melody laying over it, some great guitar, kind of stuck in an 80s mentality, but at the same time, that 80s mentality that worked well for the Moody's. And I also think was kind of the template for the War on Drugs. So I like that. Pretty good song. Shadows on the Wall is one of those kind of slightly slower, moodier songs that were successful for them in the 80s. I think The Other Side of Life, that title track, is an example of one of those. This one doesn't quite click, doesn't quite get that edge that those earlier songs have, or that darkness that those earlier ones have, but it's trying, kind of interesting, has its moments. Over the course of the song, it kind of won me over, but not the greatest. Um, Once Is Enough. Rock and guitar intro, just by far the most aggressive thing on here. You got horns, you got this dun 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 kind of plodding beat, upbeat, super cheesy, super dated from the 80s, but again, something about it just kind of works. Um, Celtic Sonnet. Um, you get some spoken word part, you get this nice quiet intro, really dramatic, over the top vibe, almost like a 70s pastoral folky prog thing that just, again, head scratching that they're dropping this album in 1991. It just blows my mind. But yeah, kind of interesting. It's a Ray Thomas song. Magic. We have like an acoustic intro with just some vocals, and we get like sort of like a big electronic pop rock song, kind of okay. And then the closing, Never Blame the Rainbows for the Rain. Never, just that refrain that gets repeated over and over. Never blame the rainbows. Never blame the rainbow. I mean, I wasn't. Why would you? I mean, it's a cause and effect thing. How can the effect be the cause? So, ballady, some interesting keyboard sounds throughout it. A very like, almost like video game type keyboard riff under these ballady vocals that is a weird juxtaposition of sounds that's kind of like interesting. But yeah, interesting album. Like again, being from 1991, I can see why this was a failure and it had no hits. The musical landscape was drastically changing that year. Does it recognize anything that happened in the 80s or half of the 70s? No. Could it be popular 20 years later when this retro sound came back? Yes. I just thought, it was better than I expected. Like, it wasn't bland. I thought there were some good melodies on here. I thought there were some good hooks. I thought the first half was good. I was very pleasantly surprised at how much I enjoyed this. And I was not expecting to, because I thought the last one I had at the bottom of the list. The one that I listened to before this was my least favorite. So we were heading definitely in a downward trajectory. Where would I rank this among the others? I have it all the way up at number 11. Just surprised. The opening track is strong enough to lead me in and kind of convince me that I want to listen to the rest of the album. I enjoyed it. Again, no ground was broken. They literally built on top of the foundation of they literally moved into a building that had not been occupied for like a decade, and they just made it their own for like 50 minutes. And it was a nice little stay. We had some tea, some biscuits. They sang me some nice melodies, and then I went home. So yeah, number 11. All right, that's all I got. Let me know your thoughts on this album. If you listen to it, if you ever made it this far in the Moody's discography. I think I have 2 more left after this. But yeah, they managed to right the ship for a little bit, get a little more mileage out of this thing, at least to my ears. All right, that's all I got. Subscribe, like, share, comment. Thank you for watching. And if you're a Moody's fan and gave up on them by then, check out this album and be willing to just forgive them for their lack of progress. But I thought it was enjoyable. All right, I'm rambling. Peace. Talk to you later.